Alrighty, this is George with Solo Suit. Looks like we are live. If there's any issue with the audio or visual, just let us know in the chat. It looks like things are working all right. I'm George. This is our weekly webinar with Solo. We'll be talking about how to resolve debt on this chat today. And we have with us here Melinda. Melinda, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Yes, my name is Melinda. I am in credit education. I specialize in credit and I mostly do everything on social media, but I also have different educational tools available, and I just teach you shortcuts and loopholes and ways that you can better your credit. Echo.
Yeah, I think we should be all right here. Okay, great. Yeah, and where can people follow you online?
Social media, everything is Mel Money Gal, Money, Gal, Mel Money Gal.
Okay, fantastic. Great. Folks, we have quite a few people on the webinar today, so if you have any questions, just go ahead and put those into the chat. I reserve quite a bit of time to answer any questions that you have. So just go ahead and tell us about your situation, tell us about your case in the chat, and we will field those questions for you. And before we get into things too much, just a quick disclaimer. I'm not a lawyer. Solo's not your lawyer. Melinda is not a lawyer either. We aren't giving legal advice or financial advice. We're just doing a webinar. All right. And today, a specific topic here that we're going to be discussing is how to improve your credit after debt settlement. So, Melinda, in your experience, you've helped a lot of people resolve like credit score issues. How much does debt settlement affect your credit score?
Okay, I'm going to try to answer this the best as possible. There's a little bit of an echo, so I'm a little thrown off. But when it comes to like debt settlements, and let's say you have a collection and they're trying to sue you and that goes onto your credit, that typically takes, if you were to just completely leave it alone, it typically takes about 7 years for that to come off your credit. But you can dispute that to come off your credit with the credit bureaus by simply just calling them, sending them a letter, or you can even do it online. That way, especially if the item is paid off, it's not affecting your credit report so much or at all.
Great. And how much can people expect to see their like credit score move when they're settling?
So it all depends on how much the item is actually affecting you. So if you have something on your credit report and it has a huge balance, and let's say you paid it off, then that may be something that's affecting you more than something with a small balance. Or it could be something that's owed a huge balance that you paid off or you settled. Because history, even though the item is a negative, it still carries history, and history is 50% of your credit score. But each item does vary. But I would say anywhere between 10 to like 70 points. I know it's a big range, but it all depends on the account.
10 to 70 points. Okay, that's not as much as I could have imagined, right? I mean, generally I have like a range of around like 200 for a credit score.
Yeah, well, depending on the item, actually, it could be a little bit more depending on the item. So if it's a collection that you settled or an account that you settled for, let's say something 15, 20,000, that might be upwards to like 100 points.
Right. Interesting. Okay. That's all very interesting. How long does it take to improve the credit score after debt settlement, would you say?
Well, again, if you don't do anything, it can take up to 7 years. But if you go ahead and intervene, it can be as little as a couple weeks.
Yeah.
But still, the most important thing is like by settling a debt, you're avoiding him garnishing wages. I think that's even more important because you don't want them just to take your money from you.
Right. It looks like people are saying we're having a bit of an audio issue. I'm trying to get that figured out here. Let me see what we can do to.
Yeah, it has a bit of an echo.
Right, you're getting a bit of an echo. All right, folks, give us just 1 second. This is the joy of a live webinar. Melinda, can you go ahead and talk for us?
Yes.
Okay. I think we should be able to hear everybody okay now. Folks, if you can't hear any of us, just let us know here in the chat. But I think we should be good to go. Great. Well, carrying on. In your experience, what's the easiest way to check your credit score, right? People want to know what their credit score is so they can find out if they need to make it better. Where do you usually point people?
So if you really want like a detailed credit report and something that's more monthly as far as the monitoring, I always suggest Identity IQ. It is $24.99 a month, but if you do want something free, then you can get a credit report free once a year from Annual Credit Repair or annualcreditreport.com. You get one once a year. I want to say you might be able to get 2 a year. They changed it after COVID, but I'm not sure if it's changed that. But you for sure get at least one a year.
Right. Okay. Then we got a question from Groovepreneur. Does monitoring lower your score if you are like checking in?
No, it does not lower your score. The only time something lowers your score is if you do like an actual credit inquiry. So when you apply for something, but checking your credit doesn't affect your credit score at all. And then also you can do Credit Karma, but Credit Karma doesn't show Experian. And Credit Karma is only your Vantage score, so it doesn't necessarily show your FICO, which is used commonly when you get a house or a car.
Right, so Credit Karma shows Vantage, not the FICO score.
Correct.
And how does FICO work? I mean, I think people understand there's like 3 bureaus, right? You have Equifax, TransUnion, and what's the other bureau that's out there? And then you have
TransUnion, Experian, and Equifax.
Yeah, right, Experian.
So FICO is a little bit different as far as Vantage. Like Vantage more so with Vantage, I feel like Vantage is more commonly used when you're getting anything besides a house or a car. And another thing that Vantage really considers is utilization. FICO doesn't necessarily consider utilization so much. So you can have higher credit cards like maxed out on your FICO, and it won't hurt you as much like your Vantage is measured. So Vantage is really measured like when you're going to go get a credit card. They typically will pull your Vantage, but when you go and get a car or a house, they're probably going to pull your FICO. So if you have something maxed out, it won't hurt you so much if you're trying to get a house or a car. But if you're trying to get a credit card or a personal loan, and you have something maxed out, then they take that more into consideration on your Vantage. So it's the same thing. It's all Equifax, TransUnion, and Experian, but certain like FICO measures certain things a little bit harsher than Vantage, and Vantage measures certain things a little bit harsher than FICO would.
Right. Okay. Cool. Well, folks, we have quite a few viewers on here. What questions do you have for Melinda? You can also just ask about, if you're in a debt lawsuit. A lot of people come on to the webinar. They have questions about the debt lawsuit generally, wondering how to get it figured out. Happy to answer any questions along any of those lines. Looks like people are saying my audio is still quite low. I'm not sure what the problem is there on the low audio, but if you have any questions, just go ahead and put those into the chat.
Yeah, it has a bit of an echo a little bit still. I'm just avoiding it when I answer.
Has an echo on your side?
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, well, that's an interesting one. Okay, we got a question here. What can you say if you want to clear your credit as part of the settlement?
So if you want to clear your credit as part of the settlement, is that something when you file with, like, let's say you have solos who answer, do they ever give the option? I'm just curious to clear the debt as well.
We don't have that built in on Solo Settle, our settlement platform.
Got it.
Usually, what collectors are like legally required to do is to report your settlement to the IRS usually, and that can be recorded as like the amount of forgiven debt can be recorded as additional income. I think for a lot of people that's really not going to have much of an impact on like the tax bracket, or that's like totally the amount that you're being taxed very much. And then collectors, I don't believe there's a legal obligation for collectors to report debt status to the bureaus, because the bureaus aren't exactly like legal entities.
Correct. That's another thing too.
Right, but they can. I think usually collectors might be willing to do like a one-off removal of the debt from the credit report, but that's not something that they're willing to do like in mass for a large number of accounts in our experience.
Yeah, especially, I mean, if the debt is settled, you really have a high chance of getting that removed if you just call the credit bureau, write them a letter, or even dispute it online. But I see more success with letters. Personally, I see way more success with letters.
You've seen more success with letters.
Yeah, depending on that situation, like it all depends on what it is. Like if you're calling for inquiries, I feel like it's way more better. You have way more of a success by calling, but trying to get an account off your credit report, especially if it's settled, I would say just write the credit bureaus a letter.
Right, right. So rather than sending a correspondence to the collector, you'll want to contact the bureau to get that removed.
So, I mean, you can go through the collector, but I like to just go directly through the bureau. If you've already contacted the collector and they're giving you a hard time, or let's say they're giving you telling it's going to take a long time, the bureau ultimately just need to click a button.
Right. I would agree that going directly to the bureau is probably the better route there. Yeah, for getting that kind of thing done. Okay, we have some questions coming in now, so let's see the next one. And some people are saying my audio is all good now, so that's great. We've got a question from Jerry. What are your chances of getting a case dismissed against the original creditor? I'm happy to weigh in on that. So the main factor is, do you owe the debt? Right? So if this is a debt that you're familiar with, like you're the right person, it's a debt like a credit card that you got the debt, then the case might be dismissed if you make it difficult. So let's say like you're served improperly, you say that in your answer, then you like request for the case to be dismissed because of improper service or something along those lines. The case might be dismissed, will probably be dismissed without prejudice. And then what will happen is the collector might take a while, but the collector will probably see you again to try to collect on the debt in court. And they can win that next time. Maybe they'll try to do everything more technically correctly, and then they'll just try to collect on the debt. Because if they go to trial, they'll very likely be able to prove that you owe the debt, and that'll be where things go. If you don't owe the debt, then certainly, don't pay a debt that you don't owe. You can, take this to trial. You can try to work it out with the collector. Hopefully, they'll see clearly that you don't owe the debt, like before the case goes anywhere, progresses. So that's pretty much primarily what it comes down to is like, do you owe the debt? If you owe the debt, you probably want to get the debt settled, because even if the case is dismissed, the collector can still try collecting from you outside of court. And if it does get dismissed, again, it's probably without prejudice, so they can just sue you again for that debt. So if you owe the debt, probably the best path is to get it settled. A lot of people are going for settlement, like instead of something like bankruptcy, because with settlement, let's say you owe like a $10,000 debt, you might be able to get that reduced down to $7,000, maybe lower, maybe a little bit higher, and delete like $3,000 of debt in like a week, and then you'll make payments on that, or you can make a lump sum payment to get that thing resolved. So that's our take on like, whether or not you should try to get the case dismissed when you're working with the original creditor. Melinda, what would you weigh in with here?
I would definitely like ditto everything that you just said as far as like getting it dismissed. I agree. I think that if you don't owe the debt, then definitely don't want to pay it.
Yeah, what's your take on bankruptcy?
As far as bankruptcy, that I don't think it's the worst thing. Like a lot of people are kind of like they hear bankruptcy and they're like, "Oh my god, I don't want to get a bankruptcy." But I like so many people that I have met that are like super wealthy have filed bankruptcy, so it kind of can give you a fresh start. And then also a bankruptcy, you don't have to necessarily wait 7 years if you are to dispute it earlier, but you do have to wait at least 2 years to dispute it where it's off your credit. So now you're getting a fresh start and then it's off your credit within the next 2 years. So it's, there's so many loopholes and you don't necessarily have to wait the entire 7 years. Like this magic number seven, like everybody has put out there, but there are loopholes where you can get things dismissed. There's so many different laws that are changing every single day almost. So right now, I would say like most times when I see when someone gets a bankruptcy and they do dispute it, they do have success after like the 2 or 3 year mark.
Nice. Right. Okay. So we got another question here from Groovepreneur. How should the settlement letter be worded?
I would say that's more of a question for you.
Yeah, I think they're asking like, how should you word clearing your credit in the
Oh, okay.
letter?
I thought it was a settlement letter.
Yeah.
So to word it, you would, especially if you pay the item, all you have to do is address the credit bureaus and say, hey, obviously make it a little more professional, but basically all in all you want to say, hey, this item is settled. I do plan on using my credit, but it's hindering my chances. I need this removed from my credit report because this item is done and paid off, and I would like it removed prior to it coming off on its own.
Right.
I think you can kind of take those words and chat GPT it.
Right. There we go. Yeah, I'd say for a settlement letter generally, collectors looking for a few things, right? So the collector, when they settle, it's really, especially for debt lawsuits, you're usually going to be settling with a lawyer. What lawyers are interested in is facts. And facts mean kind of something like specific for lawyers. It's not like lawyers distinguish between like facts and law, and what they think of, what like a lawyer would think of as a fact is like, I had heart surgery on like December 5th. They aren't going to think of like, I suffered a lot of stress, I cried a lot, I'm like super sad because of my heart surgery, or it's like real difficult. They're not going to think about like all that other stuff necessarily as like the facts of this case.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to communicate the facts clearly, you want to tell them about the hardship. Lawyers are going to consider like what they call hardship very important in a settlement. So if you can give clear facts about hardship, like losing a job, having a loss of income, having like a difficult move, or things like that, that is convincing, that is rationale that they can use to settle and communicate the reason for the settlement to their clients, which are the creditors. Some other things that they're looking for when they settle. So the lawyer, the collector they're usually very interested, especially like the main like collectors that do this all the time, very interested in being compliant with the Fair Debt Collection Practices Act. The Consumer Financial Protection Bureau really gets after people in this space for like if they aren't being very compliant and stuff. So one of the main things they need to do is they need to make sure that you are who you say you are, so that they don't commit a violation of the FDCPA by communicating about the debt with an unverified third party.
Mm-hmm.
So they're going to want to know your social security number, at least the last 4 digits of your social security number, probably the full thing. They're going to want to know your address. They're going to want to know your birth date. They're going to want to know your name. The reason they require that information is so that they can match the person they're speaking with, like on the phone or in a letter, with their record, right? So they'll have like a record, has that information associated with the debt account. And then once they verify that you are who you say you are, then from there they will want to they're open to like negotiating on the debt. Oftentimes they'll want to know what your income is, they'll want to know what your expenses are, and they'll want to know what your hardship is that you faced. Like, why haven't you been able to pay the debt? And if your facts are convincing, then you could probably use that to leverage like a lower settlement. If you don't have much by way of like meaningful argument for why you haven't been able to pay the debt, they're still probably going to be able to give you some kind of a discount on the debt, just to kind of get you moving. Because I mean, even if you aren't necessarily able to put your situation into like an enticing story, the reality is that you haven't been able to pay your debt for some reason, because you haven't paid it. Right? Like something's happening in your life that has made you not able to pay this debt. So those are things that you want to put into the settlement letter to really like negotiate with the collector. And with the collector, usually what happens is like, well, they'll take this deal. Oftentimes they have to run it by their client to get approval, and then they can move forward with the settlement. Sometimes they'll have like a parameters from their client. Like the client will say, you can just settle these accounts at 70% of the face value. Sometimes the client will say, we're only settling these accounts at 95% within like a certain portfolio that a collector is working with. So those are all things to keep in mind when drafting this letter. Let's see what another question is here. If you move for a case to be dismissed, but the collector is still sending discovery, do you still have to answer? Yeah, so if you move for the case to be dismissed, and the collector sent you discovery, it's a little bit of a complicated thing, and the collector is going to have to respond to your motion for dismissal. They'll probably respond with a counter motion, and in that they'll have a memo or like an argument arguing for why the counter motion should be granted. And then the safe bet for you is just to respond to discovery. Yes, that would be a good move. Melinda, last question here for you. What are you excited about in 2024 as far as like your business goes and helping people out? Are you excited?
2025?
Yeah, 2025. That's right.
I'm excited. So the beginning of the year is always exciting because everybody, wants to have better credit, get better with their finances. So I am excited for the healthy wave that's about to come upon us, but I'm also excited too because California just passed a law where in 2025, all medical debt is going to be removed from a credit report, no matter what the amount is. So that's only for Californians. So I'm excited to see like how much this is going to help people in California, especially California, because it's just so expensive in California where you kind of like have to have credit, but people can't get credit because medical debt. So I feel like it is going to be life changing for a lot of people.
Nice. That's good. Something to look forward to for 2025. Well, fantastic. Folks, thanks for showing up today. Glad to have everybody watching the show. Melinda, thanks so much for coming on. We are...
Thank you, guys.
Yep, about half past the hour, so that's time to wrap up for us. Thanks so much for coming on. Good to see everybody.
All right. See you next quarter.